Duke Nathaniel Ravensmere tore his wife's marriage settlement in half before 40 dinner guests and declared that she had entered his house with nothing. Then he ordered Duchess Clara's rooms emptied, her allowance stopped, and the small dower estate promised to her future children transferred to his widowed stepmother, Lady Octavia. For one stunned moment, no one in the great dining hall moved. The two halves of the parchment hung from Nathaniel's hands beneath the blazing chandelier. His expression was cold, but Clara saw the pulse beating hard at his temple. He was not calm. He was performing calmness for the magistrates, landowners, and political allies seated along the table. Lady Octavia sat at his right hand wearing black silk and a strand of Ravensmere pearls that had belonged to Nathaniel's mother. Her gloved fingers rested beside an unsigned deed. Clara remained standing at the opposite end of the table. Beneath the high waist of her pale blue gown, the child she had carried for nearly 5 months shifted softly. She placed one hand against the movement, not because she feared fainting, but because Nathaniel's words had just endangered someone who could not yet defend himself. "You know I brought 40,000 pounds into this marriage," she said. A murmur traveled around the table. Nathaniel's gaze hardened. "Your father promised 40,000 pounds. The money was never delivered in full." "That is untrue. Mr. Mercer has examined the accounts." At the mention of the family solicitor, Clara looked toward the thin man standing near the fireplace. Gideon Mercer lowered his eyes with an imitation of professional regret. Clara had distrusted him for months. 3 times she had asked Nathaniel why rental income from the western farms no longer appeared in the household books. 3 times Nathaniel had accused her of searching for faults in men whose business she could not understand. She understood those books better than any man in the room. Her father, Sir Thomas Vale, had possessed neither a son nor patience for convention. He had taught Clara to read leases, settlements, mortgages, and trust instruments, while other girls learned decorative painting. Nathaniel had once admired that ability. During the first year of their marriage, he had called her his clear-eyed counselor. Tonight, he had turned it into evidence of greed. "The settlement protected Brackenmere for me during my lifetime," Clara said, "and for our children after my death. You cannot convey it merely because Mr. Mercer has placed another deed before you." Lady Octavia gave a sorrowful sigh. "Still speaking as though Ravensmere belongs to you." Clara looked at her. "Brackenmere belonged to my grandmother, who has been dead for 11 years. Death does not invalidate a lawful trust." Nathaniel's face changed at that, not with doubt, but anger. Clara recognized the difference, and it wounded her more deeply than the public accusation. He had heard enough to know he should delay. He could have ordered Mercer to produce the original accounts. He could have dismissed the guests and spoken privately with his wife. Instead, he turned toward the fire. "Nathaniel," Clara said. He paused. It was the last opening she would offer him. "The document in your hands protects your child," she said quietly. "If you destroy it without reading the schedules attached to the original, you do so knowingly." For an instant, his fingers loosened. Lady Octavia leaned toward him. "She is frightening you with legal language, because she knows the fraud has been uncovered." Nathaniel cast both halves into the flames. The parchment curled immediately. Wax melted into a dark red pool, and Clara watched the written promises of their wedding night blacken beneath the grate. "There," Nathaniel said. "The matter is finished." No, Clara thought. It has only become public. She did not plead. The parchment he had burned was merely the estate copy. A marriage settlement of such value would have been executed in counterparts, with originals held by trustees. Nathaniel knew enough law to understand that, or he had once known it, before wounded pride made Lady Octavia's lies easier to accept than his wife's warnings. Mercer slid the new deed across the table. Nathaniel signed it. That choice, more than the torn parchment, broke something within Clara. He was not confused. He had been warned, and he had chosen to proceed. The housekeeper appeared in the doorway 20 minutes later, pale with embarrassment. "Your Grace," Mrs. Bell whispered, "His Grace has instructed us to prepare the east rooms for Lady Octavia. Your belongings are to be placed in the north nursery until a carriage can be arranged." Clara rose without touching the arm offered by the elderly man beside her. "And the household allowance?" "Stopped as of this evening." Her thoughts went immediately to the village school, to her widowed sister Anne, and to the 6 servants whose wages Clara paid personally. Nathaniel knew they depended upon her. By cutting off her allowance, he had not merely humiliated his wife. He had punished everyone loyal to her. Lady Octavia lifted the ring of household keys from the table. "I shall relieve you of these." Clara unclasped the keys from her waist, but before surrendering them, she removed one small iron key from the ring. Mercer noticed. "What does that open?" he asked. "My writing box." It was not a lie. It simply did not open the writing box currently standing in her bedchamber. Lady Octavia accepted the remaining keys with a smile. Upstairs, antios for already emptying Clara's rooms. Gowns lay across open trunks. Her books had been stacked carelessly upon the floor. One footman carried away the walnut writing desk Nathaniel had given her on their first anniversary. Clara ran her hand across its scratched edge as it passed. "Put it in storage," Lady Octavia ordered from the corridor. "No," Nathaniel said behind her. "Sell it with anything else purchased from the Ravensmere accounts." Clara turned slowly. He had followed her upstairs, perhaps expecting tears now that they were nearly alone. She gave him none. "You gave me that desk. I believed your dowry had paid for it." The cruelty landed precisely because it used to be unthinkable. Clara held his gaze. "One day, you will remember every opportunity you had to stop this." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "And one day, you may admit what your family did." Before Clara could ask what Mercer had shown him, hoofbeats thundered across the front courtyard. A servant shouted below. The front doors opened, releasing a gust of cold air through the hall. Moments later, a mud-covered messenger stumbled upstairs, carrying a leather dispatch case, stamped with the seal of the Court of Chancery. "I require Duchess Clara Ravensmere," he gasped. Mercer appeared behind Nathaniel. All color vanished from the solicitor's face. Clara noticed. The messenger bowed and handed her a sealed petition. It had been filed in the name of Lady Margaret Vale, Clara's grandmother, dead for 11 years. According to the first page, Nathaniel had never possessed Ravensmere free of claim. The estate secured an unpaid marriage portion and could be placed under the control of Lady Margaret's surviving trust. Clara turned to the final notice. She had 7 days to appear before the court in London. If she failed, temporary control of the estate would pass to the newly appointed representative, named beneath the seal. Lady Octavia Ravensmere. Clara looked up. Octavia's satisfaction had disappeared. Mercer moved toward the petition. "Your Grace, that document must be surrendered." Clara folded it against her chest. Then she saw a fresh smear of red wax inside the dispatch case, and embedded in it was the impression of a signet ring that had supposedly been buried with her grandmother. Mercer reached for the petition, but Clara stepped back before his fingers touched it. "A document addressed to me does not belong to the Ravensmere solicitor. It concerns His Grace's estate. It concerns a trust established by my grandmother." Nathaniel descended the last stair and held out his hand. "Give it to Mercer." Clara looked from her husband to the man who had persuaded him to destroy one legal instrument and sign another in the same evening. "No." The word seemed to shock Nathaniel more than any accusation could have done. Throughout 4 years of marriage, Clara had argued with him, warned him, and occasionally refused his requests in private. She had never openly rejected his command before servants and guests. Lady Octavia appeared at the top of the stairs, the household keys glittering at her waist. "You forget whose house shelters you," she said. Clara folded the petition once more and slipped it beneath the bodice of her gown. "No, Lady Octavia. I have finally begun to question whose house it is." Mercer's eyes flicked toward the dispatch case. The messenger still held it loosely in one hand, his breathing uneven from the journey. Clara approached him. "What is your name?" "Samuel Pike, Your Grace." "Who gave you this petition?" "A clerk at the Chancery offices." "Mr. Alden?" Mercer answered before Clara could continue. "There is no Alden employed in that office." Pike stared at him. "I did not say he was employed there." Silence tightened across the hall. Nathaniel turned toward Mercer, but only for a moment. "Explain." "A misunderstanding," the solicitor replied. "London is full of copyists and petition writers who pretend to possess official authority. The seal is almost certainly counterfeit." Clara examined the messenger. Mud covered his boots to the knees, and a narrow cut marked his left cheek. One brass clasp on the dispatch case had been torn away. "Were you attacked?" Pike hesitated. Mercer moved closer. "Be careful what you allege." "2 riders followed me from St. Albans," Pike said. "They tried to take the case 6 miles from here. One wore a Ravensmere livery coat." Nathaniel's expression darkened. "None of my men left the estate today." "Are you certain?" Clara asked. "I know the movements of my own household." Clara glanced at the keys hanging from Octavia's waist. Nathaniel no longer did. Pike opened the dispatch case and removed a small receipt book. "Mr. Alden instructed me to obtain the Duchess's signature as proof of delivery." Clara accepted the book. The entry had been written that morning, but the ink beneath it differed slightly in color. Someone had added a second instruction after the first had dried. If Duchess Clara Vale Ravensmere is denied possession, deliver the duplicate to Sir Edmund Harcourt, surviving trustee. She knew that name. Sir Edmund had been her grandmother's attorney and one of the witnesses to Clara's parents' marriage articles. Her father had once described him as incorruptible, humorless, and excessively careful. He had supposedly retired to Bath years ago. Clara signed the receipt, but did not return the book immediately. "Where is the duplicate?" Pike's eyes moved toward Mercer. The solicitor seized the messenger by the arm. "You have delivered the petition. Your business here is finished," Pike cried out. His coat opened, revealing a dark stain spreading across his waistcoat. Clara caught him as his knees buckled. "Mrs. Bell, send for the physician." "No physician is necessary," Mercer said. "The man has exhausted himself." Clara pressed her hand against Pike's side. When she drew it away, her glove was wet with blood. "He has been stabbed." The household erupted into motion. Mrs. Bell called for blankets while 2 footmen carried Pike into a reception room. Clara followed, but Nathaniel blocked the doorway. "You will remain upstairs. A wounded man brought me a legal warning, and his presence may place this house in danger." The danger was already here. Nathaniel's face tightened. "Must every sentence from you sound like an indictment?" "Only those describing your choices." Pain flashed through his eyes, quickly buried beneath anger. "You will leave for your sister's house at 8 tomorrow morning," he said. "You will take 1 maid and nothing purchased from the Ravensmere accounts. My clothes were purchased from my allowance. The allowance you obtained through a fraudulent settlement." Clara stared at the man who had once spent an entire winter riding 15 miles each day to court her. Whatever affection remained between them now stood behind his pride, inaccessible because he preferred injury to doubt. "I will leave," she said, "but not for my sister's house." Nathaniel's gaze sharpened. "Where will you go?" "To London. You are in no condition to travel. You remembered my condition only when it allowed you to command me." She stepped around him and entered the reception room. Pike lay pale and shaking upon the settee. While Mrs. Bell cut away the bloodied cloth, Clara noticed something sewn inside his coat lining, a narrow pocket containing a rolled sheet of parchment. The duplicate. She waited until Nathaniel was called away by one of the magistrates. Then she drew the parchment free and concealed it in her sleeve. It was not another copy of the petition. It was a list of payments made over 9 years from Ravensmere's Western Farms to an unknown account marked MV Trust. The payments had stopped 6 months earlier. The same month, Mercer persuaded Nathaniel to remove Clara from the estate accounts. At the bottom appeared 3 signatures: Mercer's, Lady Octavia's, and Nathaniel's. Pike's eyes opened. He did not know what he signed, Clara whispered. The messenger gripped her wrist with surprising force. "Yes, he did," Pike breathed. "Your husband was warned." Before Clara could question him, a crash sounded in the corridor. Smoke began curling beneath the door. Someone had set fire to the room where her writing desk, and the hidden iron deed box beneath it, had just been taken. Clara crossed the reception room and turned the key in the door. Mrs. Bell stared at her. "Your Grace? Open the windows. We cannot carry Mr. Pike into that corridor until we know where the fire is." Smoke thickened beneath the door, spreading in a gray ribbon across the carpet. Someone outside shouted for water. Another voice ordered the servants toward the west staircase. Pike tried to rise. "Stay still," Clara said. "If the wound opens further, the fire will become the lesser danger." She placed the payment list inside her bodice beside the petition. The papers crackled against one another, 2 pieces of evidence that Mercer could not be allowed to seize. The reception room stood on the first floor, directly above a narrow terrace. Clara opened the tall window and looked down. The drop was too far for an injured man, but an ornamental cedar grew close to the stone balustrade. "Mrs. Bell, bring the bed curtains." The housekeeper understood immediately. Together, she and a footman tore the heavy fabric from its rings and knotted it into a sling. Pike groaned when they lowered him, but 2 gardeners caught him safely on the terrace. Clara was preparing to follow when the door shuddered beneath a blow. "Clara," Nathaniel called. "Open this door." She unlocked it. Nathaniel entered through a wall of smoke, his coat thrown over his mouth. Behind him, servants carried buckets toward the storage room where Clara's desk had been placed. "What possessed you to lock yourself in?" he demanded. "What possessed someone to set a fire inside a stone corridor? It may have begun in the grate. There is no grate in that room." Nathaniel looked toward the flames. For the first time that evening, certainty deserted his face. Clara took the small iron key from her sleeve and pressed it into his palm. "There is a metal box fixed beneath my writing desk. It contains copies of the Western farm accounts. His fingers closed around the key. You concealed estate records from me? I copied records Mercer ordered destroyed. The accusation in Nathaniel's eyes gave way to something more complicated. He looked from Clara to the burning room. Remain here. He wrapped a wet cloth around his face and entered the smoke with 2 footmen. Clara did not follow. Recklessness would endanger her child and give Nathaniel another opportunity to treat her as incapable. Instead, she directed the servants away from the main staircase, ordered the windows open to draw smoke outward, and had rugs soaked to prevent the flames from reaching the paneled walls. Lady Octavia appeared only after the fire had begun to diminish. Her black gown was immaculate. Clara noticed that at once. Octavia's rooms lay beyond the burning chamber, yet she carried no smoke upon her clothes and no soot upon her gloves. You should be resting, Octavia said. Excitement is unhealthy for a woman in your condition. So is arson. Octavia's expression did not alter. Pregnancy appears to have encouraged your imagination. Nathaniel emerged from the damaged room, coughing violently. One sleeve of his coat had burned through at the cuff. In his hands, he carried Clara's iron deed box. Its outer surface was scorched, but the lock remained intact. Mercer followed him into the corridor. That box contains documents belonging to the estate. Nathaniel looked down at it. Clara waited to see which man he would be. The husband who had once trusted her placed the box in her hands. The Duke, who feared appearing weak, said, "You will open it in my presence." "Gladly," she replied. "But not in Mercer's." The solicitor stepped forward. "Your Grace, I must object." Nathaniel rounded on him. "You told me no copies of the Western accounts existed." Mercer recovered quickly. "I believed they had been lawfully discarded after the audit." "Then you should welcome the opportunity to compare them." Clara heard the danger beneath his calm voice. Nathaniel did not yet trust her, but doubt had entered the structure Mercer had built around him. That made the solicitor more dangerous, not less. An hour later, the fire had been contained. The room was ruined, and Clara's desk had collapsed beneath a blackened beam. Nathaniel brought the deed box to the library, where Mercer and Octavia were excluded under protest. Clara unlocked it. Inside lay 3 account books, letters from Brackenmere tenants, and her father's copy of the marriage settlement. The original seals were unbroken. Nathaniel stared at the complete document. "It exists," he said. "You knew another copy might exist before you burned yours." His eyes remained on the parchment. "Mercer told me the trustees had surrendered every counterpart after discovering the fraud, and you did not ask to see their written statement. I saw a letter from Sir Edmund Harcourt." Clara searched the box and removed an older letter bearing Sir Edmund's signature. She placed it beside the page Nathaniel produced from his coat. The differences were small but unmistakable. Sir Edmund formed the final stroke of his surname upward. The signature on Nathaniel's letter curved down. "A forgery," Clara said. Nathaniel sat heavily behind the desk. For a moment, he looked less like a duke than a man discovering the cost of his own vanity. But when Clara reached for the letter, he covered it with his hand. "This proves Mercer deceived me. It does not prove your dowry was paid. You still require me to prove my innocence after your evidence has proved false? I require the truth." "No. You require a version of the truth in which your decision remains reasonable." Nathaniel flinched. A knock interrupted them. The estate steward entered, carrying a leather ledger recovered from the burned room. Its edges still smoked. "My apologies, your graces, but this was found behind the Duchess's desk." Clara had never seen it before. Nathaniel opened the ledger. Every page recorded secret payments to MV Trust, followed by withdrawals authorized in Clara's name. The imitation of her handwriting was nearly perfect. Then she reached the final entry. It ordered £40,000 transferred from the trust 3 days earlier, the precise sum Nathaniel claimed her father had never paid. Beneath Clara's forged signature appeared the name of the receiving bank, Lady Octavia's private account. Nathaniel read the final entry twice. That is not Clara's signature. The statement came quietly, but it was the first time that evening he had defended her without being forced by evidence. Clara felt no relief. Believing her now did not erase his choice to condemn her earlier. "Lady Octavia must answer for the receiving account," she said. Nathaniel summoned his stepmother and Mercer to the library. Octavia entered first, her composure restored. When he showed her the ledger, she barely glanced at it. "I have never maintained a private account at that bank. Your name appears here," Nathaniel said. "So does Clara's, yet you immediately accept that hers was forged." Clara examined the disputed page more closely. The paper was newer than the rest of the ledger, and the stitching around it had been disturbed. This page was inserted after the book was bound. Mercer nodded too eagerly. Then the entire entry is fabricated, probably by whoever forged the petition. Or by whoever planted this ledger behind my desk, Clara replied. Nathaniel looked toward the solicitor. You ordered the Western records destroyed. Who carried out that instruction? My junior clerk, Mr. Finch. Where is he? Mercer hesitated. He left my employment last week. Find him. I cannot compel a former clerk to return. No, Clara said. But a magistrate can question him about forged signatures and attempted theft. Mercer's face tightened. Nathaniel ordered the doors guarded, but Clara knew the command came too late. Mercer had already controlled his correspondence, his accounts, and several members of his household for months. The physician arrived shortly before dawn and removed a narrow blade fragment from Pike's wound. The messenger would survive, provided he remained still. Clara sat beside him after the others withdrew. Who warned Nathaniel? She asked. Pike's voice was weak. Sir Edmund Harcourt. He wrote to the Duke 6 months ago, after noticing money leaving the trust. The forged letter Nathaniel received said the opposite. There were 2 letters. The first reached him. How do you know? I delivered it myself. His Grace opened it in front of me. Clara's heart sank. Nathaniel had not merely failed to receive a warning. He had read one, and later chosen to believe Mercer's denial. What did Sir Edmund ask him to do? Freeze every transfer and contact the other trustees. Instead, Nathaniel had removed Clara from the accounts. Pike took a painful breath. Sir Edmund kept proof in London. You must reach him before Mercer does. At 8 o'clock, Clara descended with one trunk, her deed box and her maid. Nathaniel waited beside the carriage. I am coming with you, he said. No, this concerns my estate. It concerned our marriage when I warned you. You made it only your estate when you stripped me of every right within it. His shame was visible, but she would not soothe him. I can protect you on the road, he said. You have not yet proved that I am safer beside you. Clara entered the carriage alone. Nathaniel ordered 4 mounted guards to accompany her, and she did not refuse them. Pride would not protect her child. They had traveled less than 5 miles when the coachman suddenly pulled the horses to a halt. A black carriage blocked the narrow road. 2 officers stood beside it holding a warrant. Duchess Clara Ravensmere. The older officer called. You are accused of forging the late Lady Margaret Vale's seal and attempting to seize the Ravensmere estate. He unfolded a second paper. The complaint bore Nathaniel's signature and had been filed the day before he destroyed her settlement. Clara did not leave the carriage. Show me the warrant. The older officer approached and held the paper near the window. His name was Inspector Hale, and unlike the 2 riders who had attacked Pike, he wore the unmistakable insignia of the county magistracy. The warrant was genuine. So was Nathaniel's signature. The complaint stated that Clara had used her grandmother's seal to manufacture a false claim against Ravensmere. It also accused her of concealing estate records and preparing to flee with them. Every allegation transformed an ordinary action into evidence of guilt. When did my husband swear this statement? She asked. Yesterday afternoon. Hours before the dinner. Nathaniel had already accused her formally before pretending to offer her a public opportunity to explain. Clara's maid, Eliza, sat rigidly beside the deed box. Clara placed one hand over hers, then slipped the payment list into the pocket of Eliza's cloak. The officers could seize Clara's possessions. They had no stated authority to search her maid. I will accompany you, Clara told Hale, but I require a written inventory of every document you remove. You are not in a position to set conditions. Then I shall state publicly that you permitted evidence to pass into the complainant's custody without recording it. Hale studied her, then nodded. Prepare the inventory. At the magistrate's office, Mercer was already waiting. That confirmed Clara's fear. The road had not been blocked merely to execute a warrant. Mercer intended to control the examination before she could reach London. The magistrate, Mr. Wykeland, listened as Mercer described Clara as a desperate woman whose unpaid dowry had recently been discovered. He presented the burned ledger, the petition, and Nathaniel's sworn complaint. The Duchess possesses the late Lady Margaret's signet, Mercer said. She therefore had the means to forge the seal. I do not possess it, Clara replied. Mercer produced a velvet pouch. Inside lay her grandmother's ring. It had been found, he claimed, in Clara's writing desk after the fire. Clara lifted the ring without touching the seal itself. A trace of black residue remained within the engraving. Lampblack, she said. The magistrate frowned. It is used to prevent hot wax from clinging to a seal. This ring was pressed recently. Mercer smiled. Which supports the charge. It supports the charge only if you prove I possessed it. The desk was moved under Lady Octavia's authority, placed in an unlocked storage room, and searched after a suspicious fire. Wycliffe examined the ring. "Can you establish where it has been since Lady Margaret's death?" "My grandmother was buried wearing it." "Then either the grave was opened," Mercer said, "or the Duchess has lied." Clara remembered the fresh wax inside Pike's dispatch case. Someone had used the stolen signet to authenticate the false petition, then planted the ring among her possessions. The scheme was larger than stealing her marriage portion. Mercer had created competing forgeries, one making Clara appear to seize Ravensmere, the other directing control toward Octavia. Whichever document prevailed, Clara would be blamed. "Call Samuel Pike," she said. "He can testify about the seal upon the petition and the attempt to steal it." Mercer's satisfaction flickered. "Mr. Pike is too injured to appear. Then postpone the examination." Before Wycliffe could answer, a clerk entered and whispered in his ear. The magistrate's face became grave. A message had arrived from London. Sir Edmund Harcourt, the last independent trustee named by Clara's grandmother, had been found dead in his chambers that morning. Clara felt the room shift beneath her. "Cause of death?" she asked. "An apparent seizure. And his papers?" "Missing." Mercer rose. "With no surviving trustee to verify the alleged trust, I request that the Duchess be held until the court determines whether the petition is fraudulent." Wycliffe looked uncomfortable, but the charge carried enough weight to justify detention. Then the door opened. Nathaniel entered, mud covering his boots and anger burning through his exhaustion. "The Duchess will not be imprisoned." Mercer turned. "Your Grace, you filed the complaint." "I did." Clara met her husband's eyes. Nathaniel did not look away. "I signed it after reading every accusation," he said. "I believed my wife intended to take my estate. The honesty cost him, but not nearly what it had cost Clara." "Then explain why you are withdrawing it," Wycliffe said. Nathaniel placed a second document on the table. "Because Gideon Mercer disappeared from Ravensmere this morning, after leaving behind instructions to transfer every liquid asset I possess to an account controlled by Lady Octavia." All eyes turned toward the solicitor's chair. It was empty. During Nathaniel's confession, Mercer had slipped from the room, and he had taken Clara's original marriage settlement with him. Inspector Hale sent 2 constables after Mercer, but Clara remained at the magistrate's table. "He will not return to Ravensmere," she said. Nathaniel looked toward the open door. "He has horses waiting, and £40,000 waiting at a bank. A man escaping the country needs money more than speed." Clara asked Wycliffe for the burned ledger, and compared its final entry with the transfer instructions Nathaniel had recovered. Both named the same London banking house, but the account numbers differed by 1 digit. "One account belongs to Lady Octavia," Clara said. "The other is where Mercer gathered the Western rents. He intends to empty both." Nathaniel immediately ordered Hale to send riders toward London. "They will arrive too late," Clara said. "A magistrate's messenger can reach the nearest branch and send a stop order through the bank's own courier network." Wycliffe hesitated. "On what authority?" "The stolen marriage settlement identifies the money as disputed trust property. Mercer's flight creates a reasonable risk of fraud." Nathaniel stared at her. Hours earlier, he had dismissed her legal reasoning as manipulation. Now the survival of his estate depended upon it. Wycliffe signed the order. Only after the courier departed did Clara allow herself to sit. The strain of the night tightened painfully across her back. Nathaniel stepped toward her, but she raised one hand. "Do not mistake necessity for reconciliation. I was trying to assist you. You assisted Mercer when assistance mattered most." Nathaniel absorbed the words without protest. Inspector Hale returned carrying a torn strip of gray wool found outside the rear window. Mercer had changed coats and entered a waiting post chaise. The driver reported that he was traveling south, not toward London. Clara studied the transfer papers again. "He has sent someone else to the bank. Octavia," Nathaniel said. Lady Octavia had left Ravensmere before dawn, claiming she intended to stay with a friend. Nathaniel had allowed her carriage through the gates without inspection. Another choice. Another consequence. Clara turned to Hale. "Mercer is going after Mr. Finch." The solicitor's missing junior clerk had prepared the destroyed records. If he could testify that Mercer ordered the alterations, Clara would no longer have only suspicious papers and forged signatures. Nathaniel remembered an address in the old payroll book. Finch's widowed mother lived near Canterbury. Mercer was heading in that direction. "I will bring him back," Nathaniel said. "You will frighten him into hiding. He knows you signed the transfers. Then what do you suggest?" "We offer him protection and immunity for any records he copied." provided he testifies truthfully. Wycland agreed to write the protection order. Clara composed a short message to Finch herself, mentioning a detail only someone familiar with Mercer's office would understand. The blue memorandum book Mercer kept locked beneath his partnership accounts. Hale dispatched a constable by a faster road. Nathaniel watched Clara seal the message. "You have thought further ahead in 10 minutes than I did in 6 months. That is not praise," she said. "It is an admission. Yes, it was the first fault he had named without attaching an excuse." By evening, the bank confirmed that the stop order had arrived before any funds were released. Lady Octavia had presented the transfer instruction, but fled when the bank manager requested independent verification. The £40,000 remained secure. The Western rents did not. Mercer had withdrawn nearly 9 years of income in smaller amounts, and used Nathaniel's authorization to mortgage 3 Ravensmere farms. Unless the trust claim was resolved, creditors could petition to take possession before the next quarter day. Nathaniel sank into a chair. "How much remains?" "Not enough to pay the estate wages next month," the bank's letter stated. Clara thought of the tenants, servants, and village families who would suffer for a scheme they had never seen. "We must prevent the creditors from dividing the land," she said. Nathaniel looked at her with exhausted hope. "Can you? I may be able to protect the farms under my grandmother's trust. Then you would control Ravensmere. If the documents are valid." He understood the choice before him. To save the estate, Nathaniel might have to acknowledge publicly that the property he had claimed as exclusively his was encumbered by the rights of the wife he had expelled. Before he could answer, a constable returned with Clara's message unopened. Finch's cottage had been abandoned. Blood marked the kitchen floor, but there was no body. On the table lay the missing blue memorandum book. Its final page contained a list of payments to Mercer's accomplices, including the name of the man who had removed Lady Margaret's signet from her coffin. Beside it was another entry dated 5 months earlier. Payment authorized for false medical testimony concerning the Duchess of Ravensmere's child. Clara read the entry again. The payment had been made to Dr. Stephen Vale, not a relative, despite the shared surname, the physician who had confirmed her pregnancy. Nathaniel's face hardened. What testimony could concern the child? Clara turned back several pages. The memorandum book used initials for most recipients, but each payment included a date and purpose. Dr. Vale had received money 3 times, once before examining Clara, once afterward, and once 2 days before Nathaniel filed his complaint. They intended to challenge the child's legitimacy, she said. Nathaniel went still. His half-brother, Lord Felix Ravensmere, was currently the nearest male heir to the dukedom. Felix was only 19 and studying in Edinburgh, but his mother, Lady Octavia, had spent years reminding Nathaniel that the succession remained within her bloodline until Clara produced a son. "If my child were declared illegitimate," Clara continued, "Felix would remain your heir. If the trust then gained control of Ravensmere, Octavia could govern its property as his mother and financial guardian. Felix is of age, barely, and he has signed every paper she has ever placed before him." Nathaniel closed his eyes. Octavia had not simply wanted Clara's dower lands. She had created a path toward controlling both the trust and the future duke. Clara examined the dates more closely. The first payment to Dr. Vale occurred before Nathaniel returned from a diplomatic mission in Vienna. The physician could falsely claim that Clara's pregnancy had begun earlier than she stated, making Nathaniel doubt the child was his. "You knew when I conceived," Clara said. Nathaniel's shame answered before he spoke. "Mercer showed me a medical statement," he admitted. "It suggested the child might be further developed than we believed. And you said nothing to me? I intended to confront the physician first. But you confronted neither of us. You filed an accusation about my settlement instead. I thought if you had lied about the money, then perhaps I had lied about the child." The words struck him visibly. Clara rested one hand over her abdomen. This was no longer merely an attack upon her property. Nathaniel had allowed strangers to place a price upon her child's name. "I will not permit you to investigate the baby as though he were another missing account," she said. "Until you publicly withdraw every implication against us, you have no claim upon my trust." Nathaniel bowed his head. "Understood." Inspector Hale arranged for Dr. Vale to be brought before the magistrate. The physician arrived after nightfall, sweating despite the cold. At first, he denied knowing Mercer. Then Clara placed the blue book before him. "You accepted 3 payments. For consultations. No patient is named." Dr. Vale looked toward Nathaniel. "Your Grace, surely this discussion should not occur before your wife." Clara's voice sharpened. The testimony concerns my body and my child. You will speak before me." The physician's resistance collapsed. Mercer had paid him to prepare two contradictory reports. One confirmed a normal pregnancy within the marriage. The other dated conception months earlier and was to be produced only if Clara successfully defended her settlement. Mercer had prepared accusations in layers. If Clara disproved financial fraud, he would destroy her reputation through alleged adultery. If she disproved that, the stolen seal would support a charge of forgery. "Who instructed Mercer?" Clara asked. Dr. Vale shook his head. "I never met anyone else. But you delivered the second report somewhere." "To a private house in London." "Whose?" "I do not know. A servant collected it." Clara showed him the names in the payment list. His finger stopped beside an address in Grosvenor Square. Nathaniel recognized it. "That house belongs to Felix." Lady Octavia had claimed her son remained in Edinburgh. If the address was active, Felix might already be in London helping his mother, or being used without understanding the scheme. A rider was dispatched to verify his whereabouts. Near midnight, a messenger returned from Ravensmere with worse news. Samuel Pike had vanished from the physician's room. The guard outside had been drugged, and Pike's bedclothes were stained with fresh blood. On the pillow lay a single note addressed to Clara. "Bring the original trust documents to the Grosvenor Square house before noon, or the messenger dies, and your husband's brother will be accused of killing him." Clara recognized the handwriting on the note as Mercer's. "He wants the trust documents destroyed," Nathaniel said. "No. If destruction were enough, he would have burned them at Ravensmere. He needs my signature on a surrender." A pregnant duchess willingly relinquishing her rights would appear more credible than another forged deed, especially now that the bank had frozen the accounts. Inspector Hale advised sending officers directly to Grosvenor Square, but Clara objected. Mercer had already moved Pike once, and would kill him if he saw constables approaching. "We must let him believe I am obeying." Nathaniel refused to allow her inside the house alone. "This is not yours to allow," Clara said, "but I have no intention of becoming his prisoner." Using her father's copy, she prepared a false surrender deed. It looked convincing at first glance, but one clause transferred no legal rights, and another required registration before witnesses. She placed it inside the scorched deed box. The genuine settlement remained, with Magistrate Wykeland. Hale arranged plainclothes officers around Grosvenor Square. Nathaniel would wait in an unmarked carriage at the rear. For once, he accepted Clara's instructions without trying to replace them with his own. Shortly before noon, Clara knocked at Felix's London house. Lady Octavia opened the door. "You should not have involved my son," Clara said. "I involved Felix because Nathaniel left him nothing but expectations." Octavia took the deed box and led Clara into the drawing room. Mercer stood beside the fireplace with a pistol concealed poorly beneath his coat. Samuel Pike lay bound to a chair. His face was colorless, but he was alive. There was no sign of Felix. "Where is your son?" Clara asked. "Safe if you cooperate." Mercer opened the box and examined the false deed. "This is incomplete. It requires my signature. And the Duke's. Nathaniel will sign when he learns you have his brother." Mercer smiled. "His brother is not the prisoner." He opened an adjoining door. Felix stood inside, trembling and furious, beside a writing table covered with documents bearing his signature. He was not bound. He had signed willingly. "I thought Mother was protecting the estate," he said. "She told me Nathaniel's debts would leave us all ruined." Octavia's expression hardened. "Do not apologize for securing your future." Clara examined the documents. Felix had authorized Octavia to act for him, but several pages underneath contained forged declarations that Nathaniel was mentally unfit and that Clara's child was illegitimate. Mercer intended to use Felix as both successor and scapegoat. "You promised him Ravensmere," Clara said. "But once these papers were discovered, he would be blamed for everything." Felix looked at his mother. Octavia did not deny it. "My son would survive a scandal," she said. "I would not survive poverty." That was the truth beneath 9 years of theft. Octavia had spent beyond her widow's income, borrowed against family expectations, and used Mercer to extract money from the Western farms. When Sir Edmund discovered the missing funds, they revived Lady Margaret's trust under Octavia's control and prepared Clara as the forger. Mercer placed the surrender deed before her. "Sign." Clara moved toward the table. As she passed Pike, she saw his right hand shift beneath the rope. He had loosened one knot. She dipped the pen into the ink but did not touch it to the parchment. "You made one mistake," she said. Mercer drew the pistol. "Only one?" You stole my grandmother's signet, but you did not understand why her trust required 3 seals. His eyes dropped to the document. There are only 2. Exactly. The third belonged to the independent trustee. Without Sir Edmund's seal, or that of his lawfully appointed successor, no surrender can take effect. Mercer's composure cracked. Then you will name the successor. I do not know who it is. You are lying. He died before he could tell me. Mercer seized Clara's arm. Pike lunged from the chair, dragging the loosened rope behind him. Felix struck Mercer's wrist with a brass candlestick. The pistol fired into the ceiling. The drawing room doors burst open. Nathaniel entered with Hale and 2 officers. He did not rush toward Clara. He secured Mercer's fallen weapon first, exactly as Hale had instructed. Octavia moved toward the side door, but Felix blocked her. No, Mother. Hale arrested Mercer and recovered Lady Margaret's signet from his pocket. Inside a locked cabinet, the officers found the missing Western accounts, Dr. Vale's false report, and correspondence proving Octavia had ordered Pike followed. Yet one essential item was absent. Sir Edmund's trustee seal had not been found. Without it, Clara could prove theft and forgery, but could not establish who now possessed authority over the trust, or prevent Ravensmere's creditors from seizing the farms. As Mercer was taken away, he leaned close to Clara. You believe Sir Edmund died before naming his successor, he whispered. He named one 11 years ago. Who? Mercer smiled toward Nathaniel. The same man who tore your settlement apart. Nathaniel's face revealed that Mercer's claim was not entirely new to him. Clara waited until the officers had removed Mercer before asking, What have you concealed? Nathaniel looked toward Felix and Pike. Not here. You accused me before witnesses. You will answer me before witnesses. He accepted the rebuke. 11 years earlier, when Lady Margaret created the trust, she had appointed Sir Edmund as its acting trustee and named the holder of the Ravensmere title as protector. At the time, that had been Nathaniel's father. When Nathaniel inherited the dukedom, the authority passed to him. As protector, Nathaniel could remove a dishonest trustee, block improper transfers, and appoint Sir Edmund's successor. You had the power to stop the withdrawals, Clara said. I did. And Sir Edmund reminded you of that 6 months ago. Nathaniel's voice lowered. Yes. The admission silenced the room. Sir Edmund's first letter had warned him that Mercer was diverting trust income. Nathaniel had confronted Mercer privately. The solicitor responded with altered accounts suggesting that Clara's father had never completed her dowry payment, and that Clara was using her access to hide the deficit. Nathaniel chose to believe him. Why? Clara asked. Because your father treated me as though Ravensmere needed his money to survive. Because every time you corrected an account, I heard his voice telling me I was unfit to manage my own estate. So you punished me for your wounded pride. Yes. No forged letter had forced that choice. No threat had prevented Nathaniel from showing Clara the accounts or contacting Sir Edmund directly. He had possessed the authority, the warning, and the opportunity to investigate. Instead, he removed his wife from the books and allowed Mercer to continue stealing. Nathaniel took the signet ring from his hand. The Ravensmere crest was the missing third seal. Mercer needed me to destroy your settlement publicly, he said. It made my rejection of the trust appear voluntary. The deed I signed for Octavia would then be presented as my exercise of the protector's authority. You transferred property you knew might belong to the trust. I convinced myself Sir Edmund's warning was an attempt by your family to control me. Clara looked at the man she had once trusted with every vulnerable part of her life. Then you were not merely deceived. No, Nathaniel said. I enabled them. The next morning, Nathaniel signed an emergency appointment naming an independent Chancery barrister, Mr. Elias Ward, as Sir Edmund's successor. He surrendered his own authority as protector until the court completed its investigation. It was the first material power he relinquished, without asking Clara what it might earn him. Ward examined the recovered records and confirmed that Lady Margaret's original trust remained valid. The £40,000 had been paid in full before Clara's wedding. Brackenmere and the Western Farms had secured that sum, making Mercer's later mortgages subject to challenge. But the creditors refused to withdraw. The matter proceeded to an emergency Chancery hearing 3 days later. The courtroom was crowded with reporters, landowners, and several guests who had witnessed Nathaniel humiliate Clara. Mercer appeared under guard. Lady Octavia sat beside separate counsel, still dressed in mourning black. Felix had agreed to testify against both of them. Clara entered carrying the intact counterpart of her marriage settlement. This time, no one ordered her to surrender it. Ward established the trust, the diverted rents, the false accounts, and the stolen signet. Dr. Vale admitted accepting payment for the fabricated medical report. Pike described delivering Sir Edmund's warning and surviving 2 attacks. Felix testified that his mother had persuaded him to sign papers he had not been allowed to read fully. Then Nathaniel took the witness stand. Mercer's counsel attempted to protect him by placing responsibility upon the Duke. "You possessed the authority to prevent every disputed transfer, did you not?" "I did." "You signed the instructions?" "Yes." "You filed a sworn complaint accusing your wife of forgery?" "Yes." "And you destroyed what you believed to be her only marriage settlement?" Nathaniel looked across the courtroom at Clara. "Yes." A murmur passed through the gallery. "Then Mr. Mercer merely acted under your lawful commands." "No," Nathaniel said. "He committed fraud. But his fraud succeeded because my wife warned me, and I chose resentment over examination. I gave him my signature, my authority, and my public accusation. Those choices were mine. His confession destroyed Mercer's attempt to hide behind ducal authority. It also destroyed Nathaniel's reputation as a competent estate holder." Clara felt no triumph, only the hard satisfaction of truth finally spoken where the harm had begun, in public. Mr. Ward then produced the recovered correspondence between Mercer and Octavia. One letter outlined the plan to steal the rents, discredit Clara's child, and place the trust under Octavia's control. The judge examined it for several minutes. "This letter is damaging," he said, "but it does not establish who ordered the fire at Ravensmere or who caused Sir Edmund Harcourt's death." Lady Octavia's counsel rose. "Sir Edmund died naturally. My client never met him." A voice answered from the rear of the courtroom. "That is false." Every head turned. Mr. Finch, Mercer's missing clerk, stood between 2 constables. His arm was bandaged, and in his hand he carried Sir Edmund's private appointment ledger. "I saw Lady Octavia enter his chambers the night before he died," Finch said, "and I know what she put into his medicine." Mr. Finch's testimony did not stand alone. After discovering Mercer's altered accounts, he had copied several letters and followed Lady Octavia to Sir Edmund's chambers. From the passage outside, he saw her dismiss the elderly trustee's servant and pour liquid from a small brown bottle into his nightly medicine. The bottle was later found among Octavia's belongings at the Grosvenor Square house. An apothecary identified it as a highly concentrated preparation he had sold to Mercer under a false name. Sir Edmund's death could not be proved by the bottle alone. But Finch had also preserved Mercer's instructions to remove the trustee's documents before morning and report the death as a seizure. Mercer's counsel rose to object. Finch produced one final letter. It carried Lady Octavia's signature and promised Mercer half the stolen rents once Clara's settlement had been invalidated. The courtroom fell silent. Under questioning, the entire scheme became clear. For 9 years, Octavia had lived beyond the income provided by her widow's settlement. Mercer began diverting small amounts from the western farms, hiding each withdrawal inside ordinary estate expenses. Nathaniel's careless signatures protected them from scrutiny. When Clara noticed the missing income, Mercer persuaded Nathaniel that her dowry had never been paid. Nathaniel's resentment toward Clara's father made the lie attractive, and his pride kept him from consulting Sir Edmund. The trustee's warning threatened everything. Mercer forged a second letter contradicting the first, while Octavia stole Lady Margaret's signet and used it to create a false Chancery claim. Their plan allowed them to win regardless of Nathaniel's response. If Clara surrendered, Octavia would control Brackenmere. If Clara resisted, the forged petition, planted ledger, and stolen ring would make her appear to be the criminal. Dr. Vale's false medical report provided their final weapon: discredit Clara's unborn child, preserve Felix as heir, and make Octavia indispensable to the succession. Nathaniel's public destruction of the settlement completed the illusion that Clara's rights had lawfully ended. But Mercer could not explain the fire. Finch could. Mercer had paid a dismissed Ravensmere footman to ignite the storage room after Clara's desk was moved there. The footman had since confessed in exchange for consideration from the Crown. His orders were to destroy the deed box and plant Lady Margaret's ring among the ashes. Samuel Pike's attack, abduction, and attempted coercion were traced to the same men who had followed him from London. By the end of the hearing, Mercer and Octavia were committed for trial on charges including fraud, forgery, conspiracy, theft, and attempted harm to witnesses. Mercer's hidden property was seized pending restitution. Octavia's widow's income was placed under court supervision, and she lost every claim to administer the trust. Felix was not charged. The court accepted that he had signed papers under deception, but his public testimony permanently separated him from his mother. He returned to Edinburgh and renounced any financial authority she had exercised in his name. Dr. Vale lost the patronage that sustained his practice and faced proceedings for giving false medical evidence. Mr. Finch received legal protection and a position assisting the new trustee. Pike recovered slowly and was compensated from Mercer's seized funds. Then the court addressed Clara. Her £40,000 marriage portion was declared fully paid. Brackenmere and the Western Farms remained protected under Lady Margaret's trust. The false mortgages were suspended, the stolen rents ordered restored, and every allegation of forgery and adultery formally withdrawn. The judge confirmed that no credible evidence questioned the legitimacy of Clara's child. Only after her name, property, income, and child security had been restored did Nathaniel rise again. He did not ask the court for mercy. He admitted that he had received Sir Edmund's warning, ignored Clara's repeated concerns, signed transfers without examination, filed a sworn complaint against her, and humiliated her before his guests. He acknowledged that Mercer's crimes had required his authority, and that his pride had supplied it. Nathaniel sold his London residence and 2 racehorses to pay the estate wages until the stolen funds could be recovered. He surrendered management of the protected farms to Mr. Ward and published a signed correction in every newspaper that had reported Clara's accusation. At Ravensmere, he assembled the same guests and tenants who had witnessed her rejection. Before them, he read the correction aloud. "My wife did not enter this marriage with nothing," he said. "She brought lawful property, sound judgment, and warnings I refused to hear. I attacked her honor to preserve my pride. No deception by another person excuses what I chose to do." Clara listened from the front of the hall. When he finished, Nathaniel placed the household keys and the restored marriage settlement on the table between them. "I will not ask you to forgive me," he said. "Tell me what freedom requires, and I will sign it." Clara requested a formal deed of separation, independent residence at Brackenmere, sole administration of her personal income through the trust, and guaranteed support for their child without Nathaniel controlling where either of them lived. He signed every provision. Months later, Clara reopened the village school and established a small office where tenants could have leases and debts explained without charge. Her son was born healthy at Brackenmere, surrounded by people whose loyalty had never depended upon Nathaniel's title. Nathaniel wrote to her regularly, but he never demanded an answer. He continued repairing the estate under independent supervision and visited his child only when Clara invited him. She did not promise reconciliation. Remorse had begun his accountability. It had not purchased her return. On the first morning of spring, Clara stood in the Brackenmere office as Mrs. Bell brought her a stack of new tenant agreements. The original settlement lay safely inside the iron deed box. Clara took up her grandmother's pen. Months earlier, Nathaniel had torn a document apart to prove she possessed nothing. Now Clara signed her own name beneath the appointment, making her permanent director of the trust, and locked the deed away with the key she had refused to surrender.